What if I told you there's a language even its speakers haven't heard of? Let me explain. I've consistently used two names for this language on this channel, which is Low Saxon and Twent, but there's a whole bunch more. After this video, you'll have a grasp of the many names for Low Saxon and why they're all problematic. Here is a quick overview of the many options we have. First of all, there's Low Saxon, then there's Low German, there's Plat, there's regional language, there's dialect, and then there's a whole bunch of local names. Also, a little disclaimer, there might be some names I won't cover in this video, simply because I can't know all the wild names people make up. First of all, there's Low Saxon. Low Saxon is a direct translation of Neder-Saxisch, which is a Dutch term sort of invented in the 1950s by some scholars who were looking at all these different little dialect groups and said, well, there are some things that are similar, so why not lump them all together and create a name for them that's sort of fitting given the whole history? Because if we look at the history, this is a direct descendant of Old Saxon, and it was spoken by the Saxons, so why not continue that trend and call it by its rightful name? To me, it's also quite strange that we went from Old Saxon to Middle Low German. Who decided on that switch? It's still called Saxon, and the whole of Germany is still referred to as Saksa in Finland. Why not just call it Contemporary Saxon or Modern Saxon? But you know, that's just my opinion, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But this is problematic for German speakers of the language, because to them, if you say Low Saxon, they immediately think of the state of Lower Saxony in Germany, which is a federal state, one of the many states in Germany. And in Lower Saxony, people also speak Low Saxon. So if you call the whole language Low Saxon, to them it sounds like you're referring to their dialect as if it's one of the varieties spoken in Lower Saxony, which doesn't make sense to them. Also, they've been calling it Low German for ages. This consists of two parts, like Low and German, which is a direct translation of Plattdeutsch or Plattdeutsch. And they make a distinction between Plattdeutsch and Hochdeutsch, Low German and High German. To them, High German refers to the sort of Germanic that's spoken in the Alpine regions of southern Germany and Switzerland and Austria. And to them, Low refers to the lower lying plains of northern Germany. But this doesn't work for us in the Netherlands because, you know, we don't have mountains. Our country is flat as a whole. So we don't have this distinction, this opposition of high versus low. To us, the word plat or flat simply means any speech variety that isn't educated, that's shallow, that lacks the variety to discuss a wide variety of topics. So you can see why the word plat, which is also used in itself, isn't working for us. Also, we're Dutch. We're not Deutsch. We aren't from Germany. So to us, it simply sounds as if this language is spoken exclusively in Germany, which isn't the case. There are 1.8 million of us, and our percentage on the whole population is quite a lot bigger than the 3.5 million on 83 million Germans. So for us, calling the language Low German doesn't make any sense. Also, it's partly to do with the history between our countries, recent history. And there are some people who say, well, yes, Deutsch simply means of the people. But to us it doesn't. Then there are some people who say, why don't you just call it Saxon? Well, I'd love that. But yeah. In Germany, you have this federal state called Sachsen, which is in the east of Germany, which isn't part of the Low Saxon speech area. So you can see how that may confuse people. So calling it Saxon wouldn't make any sense to Germans. To them, that sounds like you're referring to that state. And let's just say the High German spoken in Saxon is a bit like how people in the UK perceive the accent from Birmingham. Not too good. We could, of course, work very hard to reclaim the word for ourselves, but, you know, that's going to take a while. There are also people who simply refer to the language as Plat, which means flat. Who would want to call their language flat? This is problematic because it refers to any non-standard speech variety that's considered uneducated. It's not a neutral term. So in the whole Dutch constellation of languages, the word Plat can be used to refer to just basically any non-standard variety that's considered uneducated or not very fancy. So I've heard people refer to the dialect of The Hague, which is a Dutch dialect, as Plathaars. So you can see how that doesn't work for us. Then, especially in the Netherlands, there are people who refer to this language as regional language. So that's just a non-name. It's a category. It's imprecise. There are people who will say, I speak Dutch, I speak English, and I speak regional language. It's like going to a farm and saying, there's a horse, there's a cow, and there's an animal. Which one do you mean? Just call it by its name. And it's also misleading because it implies that this language cannot be used outside of its own region, which is nonsense because we've seen many times over that this language, straddles the border. It can be used intra-regionally, it can be used internationally. And if we work hard enough, we can even make ourselves understood to Scandinavian people. So it's an international language. It's not regional at all. Then there's also people who call the language dialect. Simply dialect. I speak Dutch, I speak English, and I speak dialect. Of what? Be more specific. And this is also an intrinsic opinion, because it sort of expresses that you find English and Dutch worthy to be mentioned by name, but Low Saxon isn't. So this sort of implies that you don't find it important enough to be mentioned at all. Whereas for linguists, it doesn't make any difference at all. To them, all languages are dialects and all dialects are languages in themselves. For every language, for every speech variety, there's a time and a place for it. It can be used whenever you feel like it amongst people who also speak the language or the dialect. And then there's loads of people who will simply call the language by its local name. They simply don't see how the dialects are connected because we're simply not taught this in school. They like to zoom in on the differences between dialects. We can say things like, in that dialect 3 kilometers down the road, they say things completely differently. They say vark and we say vark. Oh my God, what a major difference. And they simply refuse to see that this 1% of differences, if you zoom in on that, you can't see the 99% of similarities. Or they point at very specific local words for things you don't need on a daily basis. Even English has different words for something if you look at it from different regions. Does that make these dialects less related? Of course not. The rest of it is perfectly understood. So how does that work? Like, I could say I speak Riesens Twents, or I could simply say I speak Twents, or I could say I speak Riesens, which makes it very narrow, very hard to, see the bigger picture. Because, there are certain parameters that are quite specific for Riesens, but then there are some specifics of Riesens that also apply to the bigger picture of Twents. But then there are also specifics that also apply to the bigger Westphalian branch and basically all Low Saxon variants. So it's just a matter of perspective. This local focus has held us back for so long. It has led to dilution of the bigger picture, of people feeling proud of this language, of feeling connected to their, their neighbouring countries, counterparts just across the border. People are generally quite aware that there are some similarities because, obviously we can understand each other. But there are differences, of course. But there will always be differences. And this local focus has divided us for so many years. Like, there are about 8 different institutions in the Netherlands alone concerned with devising different spelling rules. And this even creates sort of tensions between speakers. Like, for instance, I'm from Twente, and there are about 4 different ways to spell Twents varieties. But if we move to the Achterhoek, you'll get the ECAL Institute, which has its own set of rules. And, there aren't that many differences. Still, they can't agree on that small scale on very basic things like how to spell or how to, what to do with the language or how to promote it. So I think the first one we should have to do is figure out maybe a standardized language. Who knows? I'm just throwing it out there. So which one should we use? I'll leave that one for you to decide. Leave me a comment, hit like and subscribe, and follow me for more.